because I'm such a congenial guy, I like to turn around on my own inventions and say, what if I was competing with my own invention and I wanted to have an alternative so that different parts of the world can choose based on their physical and social constructs and desires how they would make trains get at very high speed to different locations. So before, of course, I discussed extreme advancements in um, the Tesla company and Virgin company and all those hyperloops and all that in a tunnel, and I discussed that to death for quite a few years. Now let's flip that on its head. So, as we know in Japan, they're always trying to make faster, maglev trains. But when they're a maglev train, then it's like, you know, in the class, it's in a different category sort of because it's no longer train tracks that have been kind of in use for um, forever, thousands of years, even if they want to lie. Of course Romans had train tracks. Anyways, um the concept of these ones here, like this schematic was drawn out in the early 2000s, like I say everything was. So this is lifting it. I assume this is lifted on station. Um how we said we would do it is you'd have booster like lifting magnets that lift it up as it's leaving the platform, and then it's levitating with double magnets above um as everything slides around and locks. But I don't really think that this is as safe as what I'm going to be discussing today. And so let's get to it. So if you look back at the Wright brothers and them engineering flight, now there was some interesting statement made all the way back then, where people had, of course, put on super boilers and even electric super lead batteries and other types of extreme batteries that they could make all the way back through time. And they had trains that could rush along a straight line at incredible speeds just to prove a point, racing a couple hundred miles an hour or more. So when it came to airplanes instead of, floating hot air balloons, everybody yet to understand that it wasn't that everybody was saying it was impossible. They were just saying to mass produce airplanes reliably so that people weren't dying trying to take airplane trips. It was just wasn't practical until there was a certain level of manufacturing for hardly anybody to be doing it. So then they take that and say that no such thing as aircraft existed with wings. Of course they did. That's absurd. It was just impressive that using certain new design shapes, what the Wright brothers achieved. So let's, because I made a building, I asked for it to be built and for there to be a business around it called WB Wright Brothers down where I got in an accident um there by Eagle, by Highway 16, right before you get to it, by the big church. So it's weird that that's been there for so many years, but and I asked for it to be built. So it's just strange. Like, what kind of paradox of time are we living in? So I'm going to keep pushing on, though, with this Wright Brothers thing here. And a lot of people were saying, well, how do you prevent, you know, how do you have good enough controls, right, on your aircraft so you can actually fly it and have a good enough joystick and land it and have all that set up and mass manufacture that without it taking forever to build each one. So a lot of people were saying because of the dangers back then that aircraft would need to stay really low to the ground and go at a certain speed. Like this concept that the future of freeways, before they had freeways, of highways, would be like widened areas, like how they have for, they kind of make them for. I am, and I'm going to go up the farm. Okay, I'm kind of busy here. All right. Okay then. Um. Wow, that was a strange energy. It made my thoughts scatter. Okay, well, good for him. So let's see here. Yes. Being awesome. That's what I was doing. So the airplane wings. Um, like you'd have a certain height within which the airplane wings would work. Guide rails, wires, how like they currently have on top of passenger trains, but it would just be off to the side. And then in the modern era, obviously, back then it wasn't very doable. But the fact that the idea existed meant that people thought differently based within the limitations of what could be manufactured. And it made them smarter in some ways. Everybody's gotten real dumb now. So if you take a modern polymer shape, like you take like the new space shuttles. Let me open that up here. Like this, you know. Look at these cute ones we've got made. So if you take that shape and just elongate it, but you make it really light because it doesn't need to go to space, and so you've got your wings that fold or whatnot. You've got your maglev setup. Now, um, with this maglev setup, it makes it really convenient, of course, because it's already levitating somewhat. And what I'm trying to get my point across here is it's like I have to convince people, go back to the beginning, talk about the Wright brothers, talk about how I haven't been paid for my enormous invention corporation that exists already in a loop. But the point is, this would be a step in the direction of my flying maglev tunnel trains, where your wings would um, stick out and be between two electrified wires that would serve as rails, and then there'd be a flexing of the wings to the light passenger cabin, so that when you know, hit like magnetic turbulence because the track's not as perfect as it could be or something, the wings then, because you're flying, it'd be like making a bouncing flapping motion out to the short wings on either side, and they don't have to be that long because it doesn't weigh that much with modern polymer and not much metal on top. So um this will also allow engineers and everybody to get comfortable with the idea of flying on ground to save electricity, fuel, whatever. Um, Now, I was thinking before I did this video, trying to come up with various methods of employing that system on a regular rail track. Um, because a regular rail, it's, if I look it up, railroad track. Images. They have a lip on the inside, you see, and then it flanges down and back out again. And you have these, like, jade pieces that are hammered in to hold it in place out wider so it doesn't slide narrow and the train doesn't derail. So if it's already built for that, then could you potentially have wings that are however wide? Now you see how trains, the clearance on them currently is like, especially going through mountains, right? It's like it can be nothing. So in order to have this wing concept employed, like I said, you'd have to fold it in areas where it's not worth it to create a wider track currently yet. Um, so that it can be kind of used as sections of the track can support it. Um, Now the upwards lift, so long as you have a correct, like, tensile guiding wheels that are pushing, like, from a center spring outwards in either direction so that it's holding it against the inner part of the track and, running along this rail that's sticking out. Then it's really ingenious the way these rails were originally put in by people thousands of years ago originally. As they'll lie about it, this design was to be as future proof as possible, and they did think about things like flying trains. um who's to say they didn't have them for certain trips between large cities or something? It's amazing what's been lost and how little imagination is left to humanity to remember how things were. So I could try to go in and use up a bunch of energy on my paint and draw out the design, but I think it pretty much clicks in everyone's heads, the space shuttle folding wings and the whole concept of the um maglev being like self-sufficient. I guess that's the part I forgot to I left out. um you can have, like, drag, um you can have magnetics on either side of the rail. You can have a guiding magnetic magnifier, like wire wand or wheel spinny wand. Usually people like wheels. um so um my brain. Okay, so what was the final piece to what I was saying about that? Well, as you know, this type of metal on rails becomes magnified as a magnet is applied. So obviously, you can use the push pull of magnetics to keep a further lock on the wheels, like it's being suctioned through to the magnet wand wheel on the other side. And then it keeps it all locked in place at the right tension. Um, I guess that's the whole shebang. So I hope we get to see some example 3D mock-ups of what I'm talking about here in the next few months or years. They usually get around to it eventually and start talking about what companies are going to be, or large government entities are going to be investing. And, we'll see.